I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. You know, late last year, the U.S. Department of Energy chose the Pacific Northwest to be a hub for something called hydrogen energy. It's part of an effort to create more clean energy, getting away from fossil fuels. I remember back then it sounded kind of futuristic and maybe a little bit fuzzy on the details, but now we know more, so let's do a deep dive to get an update. Up to $1 billion of federal money is going to be spent creating hydrogen plants at sites across Oregon and Washington, and in the end, they're expected to create 10,000 new jobs. But as you might expect, not everyone's on board for these so-called hydrogen hubs, and that is our big story tonight. The power grid in the Northwest is being stretched almost to its breaking point. We've not had rolling blackouts yet, thankfully, but we have come close a few times, and our power consumption is only going up. Here's what energy leaders predicted for the near future during a summit in Seattle earlier this summer.
The 2024 update to the Northwest Regional Forecast projects demand could increase by 30% in the next 10 years. That's an increase of 7,000 average megawatts, or enough electricity to power 7 cities the size of the city we are in today, Seattle.
Yeah, so that's a lot, and that's a problem. And yes, by the way, her name actually is Crystal Ball, for those of you wondering. But there were a couple of potential solutions highlighted at that summit, and one of them was green hydrogen. Now, hydrogen, if you remember from your high school chemistry class, is the most abundant element in the universe, the first element on the periodic table. It's naturally found in things like the sun, but it's also part of what makes up water. It's the H in H2O. Green hydrogen is created through using renewable energy. The process is called electrolysis. It uses electricity to separate the hydrogen and oxygen in the water molecules. Then the hydrogen can be used for other types of energy, like fuel for big trucks. There are different grades of hydrogen energy broken down into different colors of hydrogen. Tonight, we're going to focus on green hydrogen, since that's what is going to be made here in the Northwest. Earlier this month, one of the first steps, the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association was awarded Phase 1 status to start working on the plants in our region. They're getting an initial $27.5 million to get started. And right now, getting started mostly means the bureaucratic side of things, you know, getting permits, drawing up the plans, getting input from stakeholders, that sort of thing. And we know now where they're planning to build. 3 of the planned Pacific Northwest locations are in Oregon, 2 are in Boardman, which is out in Morrow County along I-84 in eastern Oregon. 1 is in Baker City, and 1 is in Montana. The 4 additional were planned in Washington, in Ferndale, Richland, Chehalis, and Centralia. But the company that was planning to run the Centralia site, they pulled out earlier this month over tax credit issues. Each site will work on some aspect of the production, storage, and delivery of that green hydrogen once they're all up and running. Which, by the way, is way out. It's not even clear when they're expected to be up and running. But the feds do say it will play a key role in the government's running on 100% green energy by the year 2050, so sort of around the corner. We talked with Janine Benner, the director of the Oregon Department of Energy, about those hydrogen hubs in Oregon and why Boardman in particular.
But is a pretty industrialized site, and the project is on the grounds of a former coal plant, actually Oregon's final coal plant that closed in 2020. And so PGE, the owner of that coal plant, working with Mitsubishi and Williams Pipeline, have created a project that will be a facility that will use clean electricity to generate hydrogen via an electrolyzer, and then store and use that hydrogen to create clean electricity when wind and solar aren't available.
Other sites were chosen because they are close to I-84 and because the companies that will run those plants gave the fastest timelines to get them up and running. Not everyone thinks building new hydrogen plants is a good idea, though. There are a lot of concerns out there. One of them is that producing hydrogen isn't all that efficient. Here's Abby Ramanan from the nonprofit Clean Energy Group.
And electrolysis is very, very energy intensive, and it's also very inefficient. So, I mean, if you think about it, you're taking renewable energy that you could just be plugging directly into the grid, And you're taking that energy and you're transforming it into a fuel, which then needs to be either run through a fuel cell or combusted to produce energy again. So you're kind of getting these multiple conversions. And because of those multiple conversions, the process is very inefficient. And most electrolyzers only have a round trip efficiency of 30 to 40%, which means you're losing 60 to 70% of the renewable energy that you're putting in.
That's an interesting fact, don't you think? Chris Green with the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association says, yes, that is true, but the plan is to mostly use hydrogen for fuel, not for electricity.
If the only thing hydrogen was being used for was to take electricity, run it through an electrolyzer, create hydrogen, and then use that hydrogen to burn in the turbine to turn back into electricity, if that's the only thing it was used for, that would not, the economics of that, of the energy utilization wouldn't be very good. It's a round trip loser. And so if you isolate it in that sense, then yeah, but that's the reason that's not what we're proposing. We have proposed for this energy to be used as a fuel in most cases. So heavy duty transportation and buses and trucks and planes and boats and those kinds of things. That's in general, where we think most of the offtake is going to come in the near term. So it is an important thing, I would say, to raise, and we do think about using hydrogen, in those peak moments when we really need a little bit of extra electricity to keep the lights on in places. We want to make sure that our grid is sustainable and doesn't, endure brownouts or blackouts or those kinds of things in the future. So at peak moments where there's peak demand, having that opportunity to use hydrogen to create some electricity is better than a natural gas turbine or using diesel backup generation in places.
Another concern is safety. This is video from North Carolina in 2020 when an explosion at a hydrogen plant damaged about 60 homes. One of the homes was uninhabitable after the explosion. Fortunately, no one was hurt or killed, but opponents argue hydrogen does come with big risks.
Hydrogen is a very volatile molecule, and it's very small and leak prone. So then you run into several issues with transporting it through pipelines. First of all, you can't transport hydrogen through any sort of steel pipeline because it will diffuse through the steel alloy, create a ton of cracks, and then you get explosions in those cracks. So you need to be very careful about the material that those pipelines are made out of. In addition, because the molecule is so small, and it's very prone to leakage, and we don't currently have any equipment that's sensitive enough to capture those leaks before they get to an explosion level event. And the reason we talk about explosions with hydrogen so often is hydrogen is a very explosive molecule. It burns 4 times as hot as natural gas. If anyone's familiar with the Hindenburg disaster, that's a great example where it was a hydrogen blimp that exploded. And that is part of the reason hydrogen explosions are so dangerous, is because it burns so hot. It's much harder to put that out effectively. So in addition to being concerned about the leaks just from the secondary greenhouse gas effect you get when that hydrogen is leaking to the atmosphere, we are also concerned about how well those leaks are being monitored from the sake of the community, and whether, for example, local firefighters are being trained on how to fight hydrogen fires.
All right, so lots of concerns. Folks with the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub say, of course, safety is a priority and a requirement with their federal funding. But the last big concern we'll address tonight is water usage. Remember, in that electrolysis process, H2O, water molecules are broken down to extract the hydrogen. That means you need a lot of water.
It's roughly about, you need 9 tons of water to produce 1 ton of hydrogen. So if you think about that in terms of the scale of hydrogen production that these hubs are suggesting, we're talking about a ton of water usage. When you run water through an electrolyzer and you break apart those molecules, you can't recycle any of that water because it has been broken down on a molecular level. So that 9 tons of water that you put in, you won't get any of that back. And that's 9 tons of purified water. Electrolyzers are very, very sensitive, so you can't just run wastewater through them.
Okay, interesting thoughts. The response to that concern from hydrogen advocates is that these sites won't use any more water than any other energy projects like coal or nuclear, which apparently use about 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools a day. And in the end, they say the energy needs to come from somewhere.
it's very important for all the reasons that we need, not just for hydrogen, that everybody keeps thinking about and keeps talking about the need to bring on more renewable generation assets throughout the region. We're going to need these because of all the decarbonization policies we've already implemented. We want to charge all of our cars. We want to get rid of gasoline cars. We need data centers to store things and focus on cybersecurity issues that we have. So we're going to need more clean electricity as a region, even if you don't have hydrogen. Hydrogen is a very small portion of the overall energy utilization portfolio, even as we project it out over the next 20 and 30 years.
All right, we're just scratching the surface now when it comes to these hydrogen hubs. There's still a lot to talk about. For instance, if you're creating 10,000 jobs, do those people have enough places to live and to go to school and hospitals and on and on and on? And do people already living in these areas want these plants coming in? Lots of questions. Now we want to know what you think. If you live in Boardman or Baker City especially, please, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think about these developments. And for the rest of you, are you convinced that up to $1 billion from the feds is worth it to build these hydrogen hubs? Would you rather that money go to other green energy sources? Email us, will you? The address is thesstory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. In the meantime, coming up next on The Story, Portland's police chief takes questions on the recriminalization of drugs that takes effect on Sunday, how his officers will handle the deflection fiasco in Multnomah County, and why he says there's a high likelihood that use of force could come into play. When The Story returns. Just 2 days now until possession of hard drugs becomes a crime again in Oregon. And today we heard from Portland Police Chief Bob Day on how his officers will enforce the new law. At the same time, they'll be offering deflection towards treatment instead of jail. Turns out officers will partner with a limited number of addiction specialists to bring services straight to the streets. Our Blair Best explains how they plan to walk that very fine line between public safety and health care.
In 2 days, drug possession becomes a crime again in Oregon, and talks are ongoing as to how that will be enforced in downtown Portland.
I've been in a lot of meetings, folks, so I'm trying to give you the best of my knowledge.
Starting Sunday, if police catch someone in possession of hard drugs, they'll put them in handcuffs and check to see if they have any outstanding warrants or immediate medical issues. If they don't, they'll be offered what's called deflection, the option of treatment over jail.
And right now, because there is not a location to take people to, we'll get on the phone and we'll call the deflection coordinator.
That's when the team at 4D Recovery comes in.
They're going to call us and we're going to send over a person in recovery, a peer, somebody like me, to try to talk to the person about, entering treatment, quitting using drugs, starting their road to recovery.
They will have 3 to 5 peers doing this across Multnomah County. Portland police will wait 30 minutes for them to show up.
We're not able to just wait around.
So we'll get there as quick as we can in this immediate iteration.
From there, police will leave, and the person using drugs will have 30 days to engage in recovery services. If caught again within the next 30 days, they'll go straight to jail. Police will rely on the county to keep track.
But somewhere in here, common sense has to prevail, right? If it's, every 2, 3, 4 days, we're contacting the same person over the course of a 30-day period, then my direction is going to be that we need to take that person to jail.
Obviously, if I had to choose, I think it's good. If that's what we get, that they're doing treatment over jail, we'll take what we can get.
Due to short staffing, that choice is only available to people Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Outside those hours, people face a citation or jail.
I didn't realize addiction followed those hours. I don't know.
There is certainly a lack of equity in that. But I would argue that it's not necessarily uncommon. I'm not saying it's right. This is going to be a work in progress. This takes off on Sunday, and it's going to be a work in progress.
Now, due to this work in progress, the chief is expecting to make changes to how they respond to this as soon as next week. Pat?
And Blair, I get that it won't be an overnight fix, but what about people calling in from the community? Can people expect to get a police response if they call 911 or non-emergency to complain about public drug use that they see?
So the short answer is yes, when resources are available. Just because a law changes on Sunday doesn't mean Portland police will have some team dedicated to finding people using and possessing hard drugs. The closest thing they have to that would be, say, the downtown bike squad. But even then, they have other police work that needs to be done. Here's the chief asking for patience earlier today.
I am going to ask for some grace and some patience. I fully expect there will be times when people will call, but the delay in our response, when we get there, the person will be gone, which once again is not uncommon for other calls for service, unfortunately, but that's a reality. We don't have enough officers. The reality is the police bureau, as you said, just as recently as a few years ago, had 200 plus more than we have currently right now, and the demand is high, and the expectations are high, and the challenges are real. So we do not have enough.
Well, okay, Blair, but since they're so short-staffed, how can they spend 30 minutes waiting for an outreach worker to meet them? What happens if the outreach worker doesn't show up in time?
Right, so those questions came up today. The chief says he wanted it to be 15 minutes, but given the few outreach workers actually doing this work across Multnomah County, he said it's more realistic for it to be 30 minutes. But if they don't show up within that 30-minute window, police will take people to jail. The reality is they may get another more pressing call they need to respond to within that window. And it's unclear if when that happens, they will cite and release people or take them to jail or send some location information to the outreach worker to find them. That really all falls under the officer's discretion. Now, we talked with those people at 4D Recovery. They're doing this deflection outreach work in Clackamas and Washington County as well, but with a slightly different approach.
Also, like in other counties, what we're doing is people who are cited or whatever, we're getting a list of those people and then we're following up, or we're going to meet them at the courthouse. We're finding different ways so that it's not this burden on the police to sit and wait, because they shouldn't have to do that. And so however this plays out over the long term, what is important is that we're not having a criminal justice approach solely where we just want to lock everybody up.
All right, so there's no list right now in Multnomah County like he was describing is happening in neighboring counties. But I want to go back to Portland Police. The chief took time today to express his safety concerns around all of this, seeing as this is a law that officers have not been enforcing for a few years now.
There's risk involved with using law enforcement now to step into this space that it has not been in for several years. And what I mean by that is the physical, taking people into custody, putting handcuffs on them. There's a high likelihood there will be uses of force involved. And I just want to be really clear that we all have our eyes wide open, that we are doing our best to interdict into a space with our community that we believe is in the best interest of both the individuals that are participating in this drug use as well as the overall sentiment of the community. But there are risks involved, and we will do everything in our power to mitigate those. We will continue to be consistent with our policies, our procedures, our oversight, our documentation. None of that's going to change. We will, with the use of body-worn cameras, we're going to be able to have lots of material to review and see.
All right, so again, the regular hours for this deflection option will be Monday through Friday, but we're told there'll be limited hours for the first 2 days over the holiday weekend as this whole thing gets kicked off, and we'll be following it. Pat.
All right, thank you, Blair. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all rolls out. Week number 1 of the federal trial over the largest grocery merger in U.S. history just wrapped up in downtown Portland today. It was the first time that we heard from CEO of the C&S Grocers as he took the stand. That's the company that would buy nearly 600 stores, many in our region, if the merger between Fred Meyer parent company Kroger and Safeway ownership Albertsons actually goes through. We checked back in with Bloomberg reporter Leah Nyland this evening for a recap, starting with takeaways from that CEO's testimony.
Some of the big things he said, the company has pledged not to close any stores as a result of the merger, but he confirmed that that's not really an enforceable pledge. And the company could later decide to shutter some stores if they determine that they have had poor performance. So they acquired a number of stores in Wisconsin back in 2021. And since then, they have shuttered a couple because they have been performing poorly in the eyes of the company. So even though, they're promising, no store closures from the merger, there still could be some later on. They primarily don't operate supermarkets. In fact, they only operate 23 supermarkets in New York State and in Wisconsin, and they've only operated them since around 2021. So the entire idea of operating supermarkets would be a pretty new thing for CNS. That being said, he reiterated that it's what the company wants to do in the future. You know, he said that they have primarily been a wholesaler, but this is like really a great opportunity for them, as they see it, to get into retail. And this would be a transformative moment for their company.
Now, during that testimony, the CNS leader used the word insulting to describe questioning from the Federal Trade Commission. We asked Leah what that was all about.
One of the things that they said was, or that has been implied, is that CNS is in this for the real estate. So there was a suggestion that maybe they just wanted to buy all of these stores so that they could take the real estate and sort of flip it. So they're not really interested in operating stores. They would take the stores and then sell off that real estate, because oftentimes it's in like pretty great places in various cities. It might be worth more as something else. He said that was insulting, you know, that they are a grocery business and they've always wanted to be a grocery business.
Okay, there you go. 1 week of the trial down. We're expecting 2 more weeks of it in downtown Portland. We'll be sure to bring you the latest highlights. One other interesting nugget from the trial this week is that CNS said if the merger goes through and they become the third company and they buy a bunch of these stores, they will not be bringing their Piggly Wiggly brand to the Northwest. Instead, they would rebrand 49 Safeway and 9 Albertson stores to become QFCs, and then they'd leave the other stores with their original names. But many of you wrote to us last night when we mentioned something along those lines, remembering that Piggly Wiggly stores were in Oregon long ago. Kim wrote to say, I remember Piggly Wiggly in the 1960s. It was on Barber Boulevard near the Capitol Highway exit off of I-5 South. I remember shopping lots of times with my grandfather. It was the closest grocery store to their home. And Candy told us there were a few Piggly Wiggly stores in Portland years and years ago, like in the 60s. There was one on Broadway and about 68th, close to the Binford Apartments. How about that? And thanks to our friends at the Oregon Historical Society, we have a look at Portland's store, most likely the one along Northeast Broadway. We don't have an exact date on this, but it's between 1933 and 41. This picture shows a Buick being given away as part of an Ivory soap promotion. And it turns out Portland was not the only home of the Piggly Wigglies in Oregon, by the way. Lori wrote to us to say, fun fact, there was a Piggly Wiggly in Bend, Oregon in the 60s. My mom shopped there. We couldn't find any photos of that store, but we did uncover this one in the Historical Society's digital collection. You can see it's from Pendleton, showing the Pendleton Hotel there. But if we zoom in the store sign on the left, hotel, you can see Piggly Wiggly right there, partially covered by a streetlight. According to the envelope, this picture was taken way back in 1945. Pretty cool. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching and for letting us know about all those stores. And remember the story, our collective story, that never ends. Timber 360 is coming your way next. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend. Even though Monday's a holiday, I'm going to be working. News never takes a holiday. I'll see you right back here Monday night.